How could something so profoundly not there suddenly manifest with such undeniable presence? But the true question that still keeps me awake, cold with dread, is this: what if it was always there, merely sleeping beneath the surface of our understanding? And if so, what finally stirred it from its slumber, and what unholy price will we pay for that awakening? I heard some of it from a logistics guy who worked for Project Liminal, the one responsible for the specialized transport of their rather unusual equipment. He'd never gone into the field himself, not really. Just handled the manifest, the permits, the occasional emergency extraction. He spoke of Dr. Aris Thorne with a kind of awe, mixed with a palpable weariness. She was, he said, like a slow-burning fuse, always there, always doing the work, even when everyone else had forgotten what the initial spark was supposed to achieve. She was 55 then, or maybe 56, the dates get a little blurry in the retelling, you know. But her dedication, that was crystal clear, even filtered through a third party. She'd been on Project Liminal for over a decade. Her official title was something like Lead Anomaly Signature Analyst, but what it really meant, according to the logistics guy, was that she was the one who listened to the static, sorted through the noise, hoping to find a pattern that wasn't just interference. This particular sector, the one they called Zone Gamma-7, in the internal reports, was notorious. A magnet for false positives, strange atmospheric effects, and just enough ambiguous data to keep the funding alive without ever yielding anything concrete. A perfect place, some might say, for things to get lost. Aris had set up a new grid of acoustic sensors, a customized array of acid-lime transducers specifically designed to pick up ultralow-frequency harmonics. Standard equipment had failed there for years. Her predecessor had thrown his hands up and retired to a quiet life of competitive gardening, or so the story went. Aris, though, she just recalibrated. She believed the problem wasn't the signal, but their ears. For months, the readings were unremarkable. Just the rustle of the swamp, the distant hum of power lines, the occasional, inexplicable drop in ambient temperature that always seemed to coincide with a flock of migrating birds. Her team, a rotating roster of mostly younger, eager, but ultimately impatient postdocs, would log the data, run their algorithms, and declare the sector stable. They'd move on to the next promising blip on the regional map, leaving Aris to the quiet hum of her consoles, the sterile glow of the electric violet screens in her mobile lab, which was, if I recall, a repurposed shipping container parked at the edge of the zone. Then came the harmonic. Not loud. Not even distinctly audible without specialized equipment. But it was there. A perfectly formed, complex wave, like nothing she'd ever seen before. It appeared, she told the logistics guy, for exactly 7.3 seconds, vanished, and then, inexplicably, reappeared 2 hours later, identical in every measurable characteristic. That's not quite right. It reappeared 2 hours and 14 minutes later, or was it 2 hours and 17? The details, you know, they get fuzzy. But the pattern was the same. A short burst, a long silence, another burst. Her junior, Dr. Alastair Finch, a man who believed every anomaly had an immediate, easily explainable terrestrial origin, insisted it was electromagnetic interference. A passing aircraft, maybe. A new experimental drone. Aris just pointed to the precise, non-varying frequency, the perfect waveform. Planes don't hum like that, Alastair, she'd said, her voice, even through the retelling, sounding like dry leaves. Not with that purity. Not in that exact signature. Alastair ran his checks. He found nothing. He ran them again. Still nothing. Aris, meanwhile, expanded her sensor grid. She deployed more acid-lime nodes, sinking them into the dense, violet-shot soil of the marsh, positioning them along the gentle rise of the lime-colored ridge. She worked alone mostly, the younger researchers having moved on, their grant periods ending. She ate cold rations, slept in a too-small cot, surrounded by the constant, low thrum of her equipment. The hum that was not the hum, not yet. The real mistake here is thinking that discovery is always a sudden, dramatic event. It's not. Most of the time, it's just the slow, excruciating accumulation of details that stubbornly refuse to fit into any existing category. It's about the quiet refusal to dismiss. Aris didn't find a monster, or a portal. She found a rhythm. Something that hummed with a precision that was utterly alien to the natural world around it. And the more she listened, the more she realized it was a conversation she was only just beginning to overhear. It wasn't about what it was, but about what it wasn't. It wasn't natural, it wasn't man-made, and it wasn't going away. She had rehearsed this presentation for 11 years, ever since she'd first joined Project Liminal, knowing one day she might find something truly outside the lines. When she finally delivered it, to Dr. Jian Li, the director of liminal research, she used different words than she'd ever imagined. Jian was a formidable woman, sharp, meticulous, with eyes that saw through data to the funding implications beneath. She was Aris's former mentor, the one who'd steered her into this niche field, believing in the strategic importance of understanding the fringes, but always with an eye on the bottom line. Her office, high in the central research facility, was all minimalist design and cold, filtered light, reflecting off the polished acid-lime desk. Aris presented her data, the perfect harmonics, the precise timing, the localized nature of the phenomenon. She showed the overlays, the heat maps, the statistical analysis that screamed anomaly in a dozen different ways. She'd even managed to cross-reference it with a geological survey from the 1980s that had noted a peculiar localized seismic echo, dismissed at the time as a sensor malfunction. An echo that, when reanalyzed with Aris's new algorithms, matched the harmonics footprint almost perfectly. Jian listened, impassive. Her gaze was fixed on the shimmering acid-lime data streams Aris had projected onto the wall. No, not impassive. The logistics guy said Jian was too still. Like a predator before a strike, or a statue pretending to be one. It's compelling, Aris, Jian said, finally, her voice low. Exceptionally so. And statistically, I agree, it defies terrestrial explanation. Aris felt a surge of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, hope. Then we have to escalate. We need a full-scale deployment. We need to. Jian held up a hand, a single, decisive gesture. No. We don't. The air in the room seemed to crackle. Aris remembered Jian's words echoing slightly, bouncing off the stark, electric violet walls. Jian leaned forward, resting her elbows on the acid-lime desk. Aris, you know what Project Liminal is. It's a tightrope. One foot in legitimate, cutting-edge science, the other in, well, what people call fringe. We survive by delivering results that are just anomalous enough to warrant continued funding, but never so anomalous that they threaten our credibility entirely. Aris stared, uncomprehending. But this is it. This is what we've been looking for. Something genuinely new. And it's genuinely unpublishable, Jian countered, her voice softer now, but with an edge that was sharper than any blade. Imagine the headline. Project Liminal discovers impossible cosmic hum in swamp. Our funding would be cut overnight. Our reputation, painstakingly built over decades, would be destroyed. We'd be relegated to the same bin as the Bigfoot hunters and the flat earthers. Aris felt a cold dread spread through her. So we just, ignore it. Pretend it's not there. We contextualize it, Jian said, her gaze steady. We publish your findings, yes, but framed as a localized geophysical anomaly, potentially linked to unique substrata resonance patterns, requiring further, long-term monitoring. We acknowledge the statistical improbability, but we attribute it to unknown geological factors. You retain your position. The project continues. The funding stays. What strikes me at this point is the sheer audacity of it. Not the lie itself, but the way it's presented as the only responsible choice. It's the institutional equivalent of telling a child that the monster under the bed is just a shadow, not because it actually is, but because admitting otherwise would require an entirely different kind of parental response, one they're simply not equipped or willing to provide. It's a form of protective self-deception, dressed up as pragmatism, and it demands complicity. Aris felt the anger build, a slow burn in her gut. She'd spent years chasing ghosts, always adhering to the scientific method, always demanding proof. And now that she had it, real, undeniable proof, it was being swept under the rug for the sake of appearances. She had known something was wrong with the whole approach longer than she'd admitted, even to herself. The constant tightrope walk, the unspoken mandate to never find anything too definitive. And what about the independent corroboration? Aris pressed, pulling up another file. The old reports from the local archives. A Mr. Silas Vance. He lived near the marsh. Claimed he heard the singing of the rocks back in '67. Wrote detailed, rambling letters to the regional paper, to the university. Described the same precise, rhythmic pulses, the same specific timing. Dismissed as delusional, of course. But his account, cross-referenced with my data, is uncannily accurate. He was a witness, Jian. A legitimate, forgotten witness. Jian sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years of strategic compromises. Aris, a detailed, rambling account from a known eccentric, dismissed as delusional for 50 years, does not lend credibility to our findings. It undermines it. The more specific his account, the more it makes our own data look like, well, like we're listening to the wrong people. We can't open that door. Aris felt a hollowness spread through her. She'd found something that could not be dismissed, and the institutional pressure to dismiss it anyway was suffocating. The honest accounting of the phenomenon would cost the project everything. The lie, the sanitized truth, would allow it to continue. She spent the next few weeks in a fugue state, poring over the data again, as if she could find a new angle, another interpretation that would satisfy both her integrity and Jian's pragmatism. She didn't eat much. The cot in the mobile lab, with its electric violet accents, felt colder than usual. She kept thinking about Silas Vance, a man dismissed because his truth was too inconvenient, too specific. He had seen too much, felt too much, articulated it too clearly, and for that, he was labeled unreliable. The detail itself became a credibility problem. One particularly cold morning, the logistics guy told me, Aris found herself staring at an old, faded photograph tacked to the wall of her mobile lab. It was a picture of her and Jian, taken years ago, at the very start of Project Liminal. They were younger, standing in front of a newly installed sensor array, both smiling, full of idealistic vigor. Jian had her arm around Aris's shoulder, a mentor's encouraging gesture. Aris realized then that Jian wasn't acting out of malice, but from a different kind of conviction. Jian believed in the project itself, the institution, the long game of incremental scientific progress. She saw Aris's findings as a threat to that long game, a grenade thrown into a carefully constructed edifice. Maybe you felt this too, that impossible choice between a pure, unvarnished truth and the survival of something larger than yourself. Jian Li, sitting at her desk, the acid-lime glow of her monitor reflecting in her glasses, felt a familiar ache in her jaw. She had read Aris's final report. Every page. Every graph. The data was unassailable. The harmonic signature, the temporal precision, the localized field. Aris had done it. She had found something genuine. Jian closed her eyes for a moment, the ghost of an old, familiar doubt whispering at the edges of her resolve. She remembered her own early days, the thrill of chasing impossible signals, the sheer joy of a pattern emerging from chaos. She knew, deep down, that Aris was right. But knowing wasn't enough. She thought of the years she'd fought for Project Liminal, the endless grant applications, the skeptical reviews, the political maneuvering. She'd built this. She'd created a safe harbor for research that would otherwise be ridiculed out of existence. To allow Aris's raw, explosive truth to detonate now would be to sink the whole ship. It wasn't just her career, it was the careers of dozens of other researchers, the continued study of a dozen other low-level anomalies that, while less dramatic, were still vital. Strategic justice, she reminded herself. Sometimes you had to sacrifice a battle to win the war. It was a cold comfort. Aris walked back into Jian's office a week later, her face set. She hadn't slept. The silence and the sterile, electric violet corridors felt oppressive. She carried a single, slim data drive. "I've reframed the report," she said, her voice flat. "Per your recommendations. It's now a geophysical anomaly of unique localized acoustic properties. The Vance corroboration has been removed entirely. The speculative conclusions have been toned down to further research required for definitive causation." Jian nodded slowly, a hint of relief in her posture. "Good. That's responsible, Aris. It allows us to continue. To monitor." "Yes," Aris replied, without inflection. "It allows us to continue. And to monitor." She placed the data drive on Jian's acid-lime desk. "This is the official version." She paused, and the logistics guy said he heard the air in the room just thickened. Aris reached into the deep violet pocket of her field jacket and pulled out another, identical data drive. "This," she said, holding it up, "is the actual version. The raw data. Vance's letters. My unadulterated analysis. Everything." Jian looked at the second drive, then at Aris. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. "And what do you intend to do with that, Aris?" Aris smiled then, a small, tired curve of her lips. "Not because it was funny. Because the alternative was worse. Nothing. For now. It's just, for me. So I don't forget. So I know what we actually found." The exchange was quick, professional, utterly devoid of overt emotion. Two women, speaking in code, acknowledging a profound, shared understanding, and a fundamental, irreconcilable difference. It was a private confrontation that confirmed everything and changed nothing structurally. "I'll need you to sign a non-disclosure on the raw data," Jian stated, her voice returning to its usual precise tone. "Standard protocol for any unreleased findings." "Of course," Aris replied, without hesitation. "Already drafted it. It's on the drive. For you to sign, too." She walked out, leaving the official drive on Jian's desk, the other clutched tight in her hand. The story, as the logistics guy understood it, was that Aris Thorne continued her work at Project Liminal. Her geophysical anomaly paper was published, garnering mild interest, enough to secure continued funding. Alastair Finch even co-authored a follow-up, proposing new theoretical frameworks for exotic substrata compositions. The project continued its careful dance on the tightrope. Aris remained the lead anomaly signature analyst, returning to her electric violet mobile lab, to the quiet hum of her acid-lime sensors. She still listened. She still recorded. The harmonic was still there, pulsing with its impossible rhythm in zone Gamma-7. She filed the new data, meticulously, into her personal archive, alongside the first drive, the one containing the truth that was too expensive to publish. "I'm not going to pretend this resolved cleanly. I still don't know if Aris made the right choice, if Jian's strategic pragmatism was truly justified. Was it better to preserve the institution, even at the cost of a singular, profound truth? Or should Aris have sacrificed everything to scream that truth from the rooftops, knowing it might bring down the very structure that allowed her to even look for it in the first place?" "The last I heard, Aris still works for Project Liminal. She's probably in her early 60s now. Still out there, in the violet-shot marsh, or maybe on the acid-lime ridge, listening." The logistics guy said she once mentioned, almost offhand, that the harmonic had started to shift, subtly, in its cadence, its intervals. She didn't say what that meant. Just that it was different. And that she was the only one who knew how to listen to the difference. It was almost midnight when Aris finally packed up her portable acoustic reader. The small device, no bigger than her hand, still registered the faint, perfectly regular harmonic. She held it, its acid lime casing cool against her palm, the single violet indicator light pulsing steadily. She had found the truth. She had proven it. She had even, in her own quiet way, preserved it. But it was a truth that remained hers alone, a weight carried in the quiet of her own mind, echoing the unseen rhythm of the marsh. What do you do, when you spend your life finding things that cannot be explained, only to discover that the most dangerous thing about them isn't their existence, but the implications of their acknowledgement? The logistics guy still has a box of her old field reports, gathering dust in a forgotten corner of the Project Liminal archives. He kept them, he said, because the handwriting in the margins, Aris's own meticulously penned notes, told a different story than the typed, sanitized text. He never read them himself, not really. Just knew they were there. A small, physical testament to an unseen cost. The way she handled that data drive, the one she kept, the actual version, that stuck with me. It's such a quiet, defiant act. Not a grand gesture, not a resignation, just a personal, internal refusal to let the truth be entirely erased. It's like a secret kept not for power, but for integrity, and the weight of that is just immense. Jian Li's decision, to prioritize the institution over the uncomfortable truth, that's a tough one to unpack. Part of me understands the cold logic of it, the need to protect the whole. But the cost to Aris, and to the scientific record itself, feels like a betrayal. I wonder if Jian ever looks at the drive on her desk and thinks about the one Aris walked away with. What truly happens to a person when they're forced to make peace with such a profound, deliberate compromise? Aris kept that incredible truth locked away in her personal archive, a secret just for her. If you were in her shoes, holding that acid lime device, would you have done the same, or screamed it to the world? If the burden of a hidden truth, or the quiet defiance of those who carry it, resonates with you, then you found your home here. Do you know someone who's wrestled with a truth too costly to speak, or carried a burden of profound compromise? Share Aris's quiet story with them, they might find a piece of themselves in her silent defiance. Aris chose to carry that truth alone, a secret preserved for integrity. If you were in her shoes, facing a world unwilling to acknowledge the unseen, would you have kept that quiet defiance, or fought to expose it? Tell me in the comments, your answer matters. If the struggle between uncomfortable truth and institutional comfort in Aris's story made you reflect on what you'd stand for, that like button is for you. If you're someone who finds themselves drawn to the delicate balance between accepted reality and the profound, unseen truths Aris discovered, you found your home here.